must be an extraordinarily exciting time for you.
Yes, I guess it is, because all the years ago when I first created The War of the Worlds, I guess like anybody who creates something, you never really know what's going to resonate in the short, medium, or long term, and this one certainly has lasted the course, so coming back to it has been really exciting.
And I mean, what would you attribute that to?
Well, I guess just the fact that it had such an acceptance both critically and commercially around the world, and in some countries where it just has never left the album charts. There's also been a continual use of certain tracks in the club arena, so like perhaps even subconsciously people have been hearing bits and pieces through the years, and even maybe not even realizing it's from the War of the Worlds, but overall it's just sort of accumulated.
Yes, yes. And I mean, I think for anyone, I mean, especially someone like yourself, to have that work, enjoy that kind of longevity. I mean, that I suppose is what every composer, every artist would wish for, is that what they create, defies generations and popular fashions and fads.
Yes, of course. I guess it's the greatest compliment to anybody who creates anything, that if it can survive that such a long period of time, it's the ultimate compliment and satisfaction. And that's something I was always very proud of, and all the people that I worked with think we felt something was good within that first version of it, that we got something right, and I think we did. Yes,
but then was it a case of once whose decision was it to embrace the new technologies that were out there, to take it, to make it even more real than I suppose it was when you first created it?
Well, funnily enough, the way this all started was late 2002, when I had a call from a couple of people that were still at what was Sony. Today, of course, it's Sony BMG.
Yes.
And they said, Jeff, are you aware that next June, i.e. 2003, is the 25th anniversary of the release of The War of the Worlds? And, those that survive such lengths of time, we normally do something to celebrate that occasion. Usually it's some form of box set or relaunch in a way that's not been done before. What do you think? Would you like to revisit it? And I hadn't in all those years, other than some club mixes that I'd worked on in my studio or with other DJs, remixes through the years, but never really coming back to it the way we have now. And I said immediately, yeah, I'd love to. It's been a long time since I've genuinely revisited my old Martian friend, so to speak, and let's give it a go. And it grew into what all these new renditions and things that we've done. And here we are coming up to June 2005, and we missed the 25th anniversary by 2 years. So
yes.
I think we've created the first 27th anniversary in the history of the record business.
Well, again, like the 1978 version that you put out, I think it was a first. That was a first in itself, and again, as you say, you're breaking all the rules, but not intentionally.
Not in this case, no.
Because it must have been, I mean, when you sit with a body of work like this, I mean, there's a certain level of respect that that you have to, that the work insists upon having, and without, I'm sure for you it must have been quite a daunting task initially to take something like this on and do it justice.
Yeah, I think just the fact of re-examining it and to see what could be done without losing what gave it whatever qualities it had,
yes,
but adding to it from a technological way that perhaps brought out things that you just technically could not do.
Yes.
And I think that it's certainly in the stereo remix, which we started right from the beginning again, sound by sound, taking it all off of analog tapes, putting it into the digital domain. Now listening back to the finished work, it's certainly a lot punchier. There's a lot of sounds that are very much clearer. A few sounds, in fact, that I didn't even remember were in the mix, because that we've always been there. I always remember because they're in my scores.
Yes.
But they didn't quite, punch through or have a clarity about them. They just made up an overall mood, but there they are in really bold colors now.
And I'm sure, I mean, you know, when you're working with orchestras and things like that, what you're hearing is the way you wanted it to sound. But then, as you say, when it was dedicated to vinyl and to that kind of thing, then so much of that was obviously lost as well. So it's almost like resurrecting the dead in a way, I suppose.
Well, to me, funnily, to me, it was coming back to a dear old friend, and when we did go back to every sound and every performance, it wasn't just hearing what we had recorded and made. It was recounting all the people that I'd worked with, some of which I still have good contacts with, others I haven't, and others that have passed away.
Yes, yes.
So all of that came back very much vividly in my imagination and memory as we were recreating this. In a way, they almost guided us all to make what I think we've done now.
Well, was there a temptation, I suppose, when as you revisited it, that I'm sure at the time when you finished the work, as any artist would and producer would say, is that when you listen back to it, you go, oh, I would have liked to have changed that, or added this, or extended that, or that now you had this opportunity to almost update the work, that there was stuff that maybe didn't make, that didn't make the cut first time round, that you could now bring into the mix and say, okay, well, it'll make up one of the 7 discs on the limited edition that that would probably have people who weren't as close to the work as you were to understand perhaps how you got there.
Well, it's a good question, that. First of all, anybody who's ever worked with me knows I'm a fiddler. I never stop fiddling, and they virtually had to drag me out of the studio to say, this is finished.
It's finished now, yeah.
Because it would have never finished. It probably would never have come out if I was let to just carry on in my wilderness there.
It would have taken 27 years for it to be released.
That's right. But coming back to it, I had to, not with any difficulty, I had to remember a lot of reasons why I made decisions at the original time, starting with the fact that we were in the mid-70s, in an era where the black vinyl disc was really the dominant format.
Yes.
And with black vinyl, you had a limited amount of minutes that you could fit any sort of recording onto.
Yes.
In addition to that, my first assembly of the War of the Worlds ran just over 2 hours in length.
Right.
So both on a creative level as well as the technical level, there had to be a lot of cuts to wind up with what became the approximate 96-minute work.
Yes.
So now coming back all these years later, we've rediscovered a lot of the material that wound up, so to speak, on the cutting room floor, and that has come into a very useful category of rarities and outtakes, things that didn't make it. There's a lot of things that, just coming back to the tapes, I'd forgotten we had even recorded, including half a CD's worth of Richard Burton's narration as the journalist.
Yes.
Simply because, on balance, this was a musical interpretation and not a spoken word recording. But it's fantastic to listen to. It's very hypnotic. And then there are things that are just ridiculously funny things that happen on the sessions I didn't even remember we had filled the takes of. Things that went wrong on a lot of different levels. We discovered a song, I remembered it, but I didn't realize we had kept it, a song that completely recorded, or up to a certain point anyway. And there it was never used, and it came back to me why we didn't use it. So we mixed that and actually added some new arrangements to it. And it's on these 3 CDs of rarities and outtakes.
Do you think that the fact that Richard Burton was the chief narrator, how much, or how big a part do you think his voice and his persona, certainly at that time as well, played a part in in its success. I mean, just by comparison to if you had used another voice, if it hadn't been Richard Burton, because in my mind, Richard Burton encapsulates so much of outside of obviously the fantastic arrangements and score, but his voice in particular, as you said, the hypnotic nature of his voice, and captured it so very, very well. I mean, do you think it would have? I mean, it's hypothesizing, I suppose, but how do you feel about that?
Well, it's a good question. I think you look at any work, whether it's a recording, a movie, you name it. In a way, it's the chemistry of getting the right people involved that gives a sort of an honest, a real accounting of whatever it is you're doing. So in respect of my musical version of The War of the Worlds, there's no doubt that we were so fortunate to attract Richard to be our journalist.
Yes.
Because he is the spoken sound of The War of the Worlds. And when you just start the album off, the very first words that he speaks, I think the listener is captured by it, and you suddenly have that voice that sucks you in and keeps you in your world for the next 96 minutes.
Yes.
So we were so lucky. It was such a great experience to work with Richard, and we couldn't have found a better voice, which is in fact why his voice will be the voice of our journalist for our animated feature film, which we're working on.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And the fact that Hollywood's decided to do a movie of this now, I mean, the timing you could probably say has worked well in certain respects. The fact that it is 2 years late, and that there's the Tom Cruise movie coming, and there are going to be two different worlds of War of the Worlds, because it's going to be interesting, I'm sure, even from your point of view, to see the traditionalists versus the an audience that perhaps wouldn't have a knowledge or history with War of the Worlds.
Yes, I think it's exactly what you say. The fact that Messrs. Spielberg and Cruise on a $200 million budget is making a modernized live-action movie. I'm sure it'll have lots of special effects, though.
Yes.
Is one interpretation, but it is set in contemporary America, and it's not suggesting that it is the original interpretation.
Yes.
Mine has always been that, the musical interpretation, but it is set exactly as H.G. Wells wrote it, and other than it's not, my recording isn't a spoken word recording, we have kept pretty much intact with H.G. Wells, and the paintings we've created, they're all set in the time and in a way that H.G. wrote it. So,
yes.
That's what attracted me to it. It wasn't the modernized look of it or feel of the story, because what appealed to me was looking at this alien invasion through the eyes of Victorian humanity.
Yes.
When all humans would have had is sort of rifles and cannons dealt with against this super intelligent force with machines that had functions of devastation and weapons of death that in today's world we could accept our technology could perhaps combat such a force.
Yes. And I mean, I think that's where the beauty of it, of what you've done, and I think its longevity lies in the fact that you were respectful to the original work. And I think that's, in my mind, not to say that Steven Spielberg's version will suffer because of it, but I don't believe that it would have the kind of buy-in and longevity, as I say, that your work has had.
Well, thank you. I mean, we've been very proud of it. We have, through the years, never drifted once from the dream and the vision of getting this into the world's arena and culminating in perhaps films and shows, which is what we're now doing, but never leaving that arena. And, there's another thing is that H.G. Wells himself as an author, he wasn't just writing a sort of a shoot-'em-up, knock-'em-down story. He was quite critical of the expanding power of the British Empire, and there was a reason why these Martians had that same sort of power. And there were other underlying themes that we've tried to bring out as well, subtly. It's still an entertainment. It's not we've never tried to preach or to create a history lesson, but where he came from was very much what resonated with me and my dad when we started this all that time, and we've never left that even at times when we were offered things on a commercial level that would have meant jeopardizing those beliefs.
Yes, because I mean that's I suppose that's always the challenge, is that if you had $200 million, what you could have done versus what with what you did with what you had at the time, as well, I think must have played a part too, because there is that. I'm sure, as you say, you would be offered, you would have been given the opportunity, I'm sure, time and time again to move away from that.
Yes, indeed, and I've got a file full of proposals and approaches from a lot from America, many from the United Kingdom and a few other countries that fall into that category of temptation. There's one interesting thing, Jason, for what it's worth, but it's a bit of a laugh in a way, but there's been some awards that my musical version has won.
Yes.
In the UK, but there's one that it also won in the United States around 1979, which was for the best recording in science fiction and fantasy.
Yes. And
the judging panel awarded this award to the War of the Worlds, thinking that this was the soundtrack to a new movie coming out. And the judging panel included Alfred Hitchcock, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg.
Can you believe it? Planted a seed, you see.
There you go.
And then, as with you revisiting, they revisited too. But have you seen their version yet, or not?
No more than anybody else if they've seen trailers and pieces. But we did actually sign a contract with Paramount this last December, which is allowing us to, because the only rights that, in fact, my dad and I never acquired was the feature film rights.
Okay.
So now that's how we're able to make our film, is that we've done a deal with Paramount, and in fact, in exchange, we've licensed to them merchandising rights.
Okay.
Which they didn't own. So
interesting.
Yeah, because certain rights that we owned, they needed really to make.
I'm sure.
Make money on from their interpretation.
Well, I'm hoping that you didn't give those rights up completely, and that you will enjoy some of the fruits from that, so that you can perhaps, as I say, have the kind of budgets to continue doing the great work that you do.
Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you. I know your time is at a premium, but thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure, Jason. Thank you, and all the best then.
Well, to you too, and as I say, have a great weekend, and again, congratulations.
Thanks. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Jeff.